This is Plant-Based Briefing, 8 Things You Don't Know About Dairy by Dr. Darshan Shah at switchforgood.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson, and this is the Plant-Based Podcast where I narrate articles with permission on a variety of plant-based and vegan topics. And today's article is from switchforgood.org. They're an evidence-based nonprofit dedicated to rattling the accepted norms around dairy and health, working to abolish the current system of dietary racial oppression, and promoting solutions for climate change. Check out their podcast as well. It's hosted by Olympic medalist Dotsie Bausch and Baywatch actress and health coach Alexandra Paul. You can find the podcast and all kinds of great information about dairy at switchforgood.org. And now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. 8 Things You Don't Know About Dairy by Dr. Darshan Shah at switchforgood.org. Even as an integrative physician in my 40s, I love competitive sports and being physically active. I've competed in soccer, tennis, cross-country, sand volleyball, and basketball, and I regularly practice Ashtanga yoga and rock climbing. Being this physically active is demanding on the body, and I can't get away with the same lackadaisical complacency toward diet and recovery that I had when I was younger. To improve my longevity, I shifted toward a whole food, plant-based diet and cut out dairy. This simple change has allowed me to continue to enjoy the sports I love. Even if you're not as active, you can still experience a tremendous quality of life benefit from going dairy-free. Through my research and practice, I've learned that there are hidden risks behind dairy consumption that the general public are kept in the dark about. My goal is to get more people to take care of themselves through improved dietary choices, not through pills or procedures, and it starts with ditching dairy. Number 1. Dairy is high in saturated fat. Many are aware that saturated fat can increase the risk of heart disease by developing plaques in our arteries over time. However, a high-fat diet can also lead to insulin resistance, per Neil Barnard, MD, a leading physician scientist. As an athlete, insulin resistance would be akin to having a diminished ability to use blood sugar, and thus ATP, the main energy currency of the body. This means decreased physical performance and slower recovery. But we're not just talking about muscle performance. The Rochester Young Men's Study, an analysis of sperm and diet from 189 men between the ages of 18 and 22, showed that high-fat dairy products like whole milk, cream, and cheese were associated with decreased sperm motility and abnormal sperm shape. The fact that dairy is high in saturated fat alone provides multiple reasons to ditch dairy. It increases the risk of heart disease, increases insulin resistance, and hinders athletic and sexual performance. Number 2. Dairy consumption is inefficient for performance and can be downright painful. The primary carbohydrate in milk is lactose. Of all the dietary sugars, lactose is hydrolyzed, broken down, the most slowly. After weaning, a large part, about 75% of the world population, undergoes a genetically determined decline in the small intestine lactase activity, termed adult-type hypolactasia, or lactase deficiency, which can lead to maldigestion of lactose. About 30 million Americans have lactose intolerance by age 20, and the incidence of this increases with age. Lactose intolerance can lead to bloating, diarrhea, and abdominal pain, none of which athletes want to experience either pre- or post-workout. If we are thinking about optimal performance, we want to consume nutrients that are the easiest and most efficient for us to break down and assimilate. Lactose is not. 3. Cow's milk is linked to higher risk of disease and fertility issues. Milk has bovine sex hormones such as estrogen and testosterone. Some needlessly worry about the phytoestrogens in soy, but truly we should be far more concerned about consuming bovine hormones through milk and cheese. Dairy cows are raised and treated much differently than they were in the past. Genetic modification selects for cows that produce more growth and sex hormones, which allows them to label the milk boxes with quote-unquote no added growth hormone. There's no need to inject cows with hormones because they're already producing them. Milk consumption is now linked statistically to decreased sperm counts, infertility, and cancer in humans. As an example, a recently published study in more than 50,000 women found that higher intakes of cow's milk were associated with an increased risk for breast cancer. Number 4. Casein in milk may grow more than just muscles. In animal studies, casein, one of the predominant proteins found in milk, has been shown to grow tumors. In epidemiological studies, it has been shown to be linked to increased rates of cancer in humans. While research is still being done on the link between cancer and dairy consumption, the evidence continues to point toward a scary relationship between consuming dairy and developing a hormone-dependent form of cancer. 5. You may be drinking milk linked to bovine leukemiavirus, BLV. Per a November 15, 2017 article by Michigan State University Extension, quote, "The overall prevalence of BLV in U.S. dairy cattle has risen dramatically from less than 10% in the 1970s. Our 2016 survey of 103 herds in 11 states found that 42% of our U.S. dairy cows are infected with BLV. About 95% of herds had at least one BLV ELISA-positive animal, and older cows were more likely to be infected than younger cows. BLV does not get much attention from most dairy producers. About half of dairy producers in our 2016 survey thought that BLV was not a problem, while almost 40% thought that BLV was a small but insignificant problem. Producers know that a small percentage of BLV-infected cattle can develop tumors, but many do not yet appreciate the hidden losses in milk production and shortened cow longevity." Unquote. BLV in milk is an issue and should be of concern to us. As published in the journal BMC Infectious Diseases, quote, "Bovine leukemiavirus, BLV, infection is widespread in cattle globally and is present in marketed beef and dairy products. Human infection with BLV has been reported in breast and lung cancer tissues and was significantly associated with breast cancer in 3 case-controlled studies. BLV has the potential to be an important initiator of cancer in human tissues, and the data reported here further strengthen the evidence that BLV-infected cattle pose a likely risk to humans." Unquote. Number 6. Dairy farming is damaging our environment. As U.S. farm consolidation has increased, 50% of U.S. milk is now produced by just 3% of the country's dairies, those with 1,000-plus cows, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. The very largest U.S. dairies now have 15,000 or more cows. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, a 2,000-cow dairy generates more than 240,000 pounds of manure daily, or nearly 90 million pounds a year. The USDA estimates that the manure from 200 milking cows produces as much nitrogen as sewage from a community of 5,000 to 10,000 people. Per the EPA, excess nutrients from agriculture, including chemical fertilizers and dairy manure, are a major source of water pollution across the U.S. As one example from Wisconsin, the state's Department of Natural Resources hydrologist Bill Phelps has said about 10% of all private wells exceed the state's nitrate water quality standard. In areas of robust agricultural activity where fertilizer use is high, this percentage rises to about 30%. Manure also contains pathogens that may include E. coli and other fecal coliforms. In addition, manure often contains pharmaceuticals, antibacterials, and hormones given to many dairy cows to fight disease and promote growth. Some Kewaunee County, Wisconsin wells have tested positively for estrogenic, endocrine-disrupting compounds. The source has not been pinpointed, but numerous studies suggest that concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, through their use of pesticides and hormones, are a source of some estrogenic compounds that enter U.S. drinking water. 7. Increasing antibiotic resistance is linked to animal farming. From a 2015 publication in the American Journal of Public Health by Martin et al., quote, "Of all antibiotics sold in the United States, approximately 80% are sold for use in animal agriculture. About 70% of these are medically important, i.e., from classes important to human medicine. Antibiotics are administered to animals in feed to marginally improve growth rates and to prevent infections, a practice projected to increase dramatically worldwide over the next 15 years. There's growing evidence that antibiotic resistance in humans is promoted by the widespread use of non-therapeutic antibiotics in animals. Resistant bacteria are transmitted to humans through direct contact with animals, by exposure to animal manure, through consumption of undercooked meat, and through contact with uncooked meat or surfaces meat has touched." Unquote. While specifically addressing meat as a source of resistant bacteria, dairy is a major component of the animal agriculture industry and coincidentally a major contributor to this issue. And number 8, there are plenty of better options available. An abundant number of alternatives to dairy products exist. Almond, soy, cashew, hemp, oat, the list goes on and on. These products are becoming more accessible every day. Even Kroger has a line of Simple Truth plant-based products, and you can find dairy-free milk, cheese, and ice cream in virtually any supermarket. When a high-quality alternative exists, there's no reason to take the risk with dairy. You just listened to 8 Things You Don't Know About Dairy by Dr. Darshan Shah at switchforgood.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. And I appreciate this post so much because dairy is so bad for you, so incredibly cruel the way the animals are treated. They're repeatedly impregnated, their babies are stolen every single time after carrying them for 9 months like humans do. They're milked incessantly, causing them physical pain and infections. And then they're murdered anyway at about a quarter of their natural lifespan for hamburger meat when they can no longer produce enough or physically stand up. So the dairy industry is the meat industry, just with additional awful cruelty built in. But it's the easiest one to give up because there are amazing alternatives everywhere you look. There's no reason to consume dairy. So please share this with anyone who might benefit. And thanks for listening.